All right, I think it's about time to get started. Darren, you want to jump right in?
Sure. Thank you, Lilia. Welcome, everybody. I want to let you know first that we are recording this, so you're aware. I'm Darren Farrington, the Executive Director of Missessian Center for the Arts. As many of you know who I've met in meetings, I've been here just a few months, not quite 6 months yet, and I'm going to keep saying that I'm new until we have opened our doors for live in-person events. Thank you to all of our guests here today, all of our speakers. I'll introduce them as we get to them. Thank you for representatives of city and state government who've joined us today. And thank you also to past participants of efforts who have put in some work to help make a cultural district in Watertown before. We know that this isn't the first time that this effort's been happening, and we want to speak to all of you too. A few months ago, I was in a Watertown Business Coalition arts discussion and was volunteered to help begin this small group to talk about the possibility of a cultural district. I worked with Michael Bobbitt and Lilia Weisfeld. You'll hear from Lilia in just a moment too. I want to thank both of them. Michael's between jobs right now, so if anyone knows of anything, I'm kidding, of course. He's been the artistic director of New Repertory Theater, and on February 1st, he's going to be our new executive director of Mass Cultural Council. So congratulations to Michael. It's been great in the small amount of time I've been able to work with him. So Lily, I will turn it over to you right now too to begin.
Great. Well, thank you, Darren. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that so many people are interested in the idea of a cultural district here in Watertown. I want to get us started by introducing Bava Rajan, who is one of the co-presidents of the Watertown Business Coalition. And this group for the Cultural District did kind of sprout from a Watertown Business Coalition subcommittee, the Arts Subcommittee. And so, Bob, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, and you can give everyone just a quick overview of what WBC is all about and how we got to where we are today.
Yes, thank you, Lilia. Yes, and I'll be brief because I'm probably the least interesting person on this panel. So it's really great to be a part of this. It's amazing that we have 75 plus people on this call. Thank you to Darren and Lilia for all their work in putting this together. So yeah, the Watertown Business Coalition is obviously 100% behind this idea and movement. I think years ago, some of you may have remembered, there was a Watertown Belmont Chamber of Commerce. About 4 years ago, they closed their doors. Myself and Doug Orfitz, who's my co-president at this point on the WBC, we got together and we thought that, obviously there was a void for the business community, but I think all along we've always known that to have any type of thriving, whether it's business community or the community in general, we know that there has to be a thriving arts and cultural element to it and presence. And we're just so excited we're at this point right now. I know over the years through the Missessian Theater and there's been others in New Rep, and Jacqueline Dentino's been a big part of this as well. And obviously Michael's involvement and him coming to town. So we're just really excited about all the pieces we have in place here. And I think it's really time to make it happen. So, again, we're 100% in support of this and behind it, and anything we can do as a team, we're happy to continue to push this along. And obviously we'll be involved. Lily is on our executive team, and she's absolutely amazing. So we'll be behind her, and we'll be behind all of you, and we're just really excited. So that's how brief I'm going to keep it, and I appreciate everybody's time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bob. Really quickly, before I pass things over to Darren, I'm just going to post right now in the chat a link for anyone who is interested in volunteering with the cultural district concept and all of the different moving parts that are involved in that. I'll be posting this periodically through the chat. So whenever you become inspired, click the link and you can fill out the form so that you can hear about what the next steps are. So I just put that in the chat and I'll keep adding it throughout the meeting. So Darren, back to you.
Thank you, Lilia. And yes, that is our goal here, to put together a committee or working group to begin to do the work, begin the process of what it takes to become a cultural district. We're going to hear more about that from our speakers, what the process is, what the benefits are as we go on. We should have at least 20 minutes, probably more at the end of the meeting before we end at 10:30 for questions and answers. So you're welcome to drop questions into the chat box, and we will come back to those at the end of the meeting. We're going to start with Luis Cotto. He is the Cultural Districts Program Manager for Mass Cultural Council. His focus is local cultural councils and cultural districts. He's been with Mass Cultural Council since 2018. Prior to that, he was Executive Director of Eagleston Square, Main Street, serving Roxbury and Jamaica Plain. Luis, welcome.
Thank you so very much, Darren. Thank you, Michael, and the entire group for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. My name is Luis Cotto, Program Manager at the agency Mass Cultural Council, and my main focus being the Cultural Districts Initiative. I am, normally I would be coming to you from the unceded lands of the Massachusetts Nipmuc tribes, but these days I am caring for my father in Puerto Rico, land of the Taino Indians. I mention that for two reasons. One, because it's very important to have those acknowledgements, and two, because you might hear some roosters and chicken in the background as I present. So that's what that noise would be. And then I will mute when I'm not on. I am going to share a quick slide just to introduce you to our team, our communities team at the Mass Cultural Council. This is a map of the Commonwealth. Our communities teams works with three separate programs: the festivals program, the cultural districts program, and the local cultural council program, which everyone should know about. It's been around for about 40 years. And this is how we split the work up. We have 6 staff, 4 program officers, 2 program managers, and the program officers each have 3, are responsible for 3 regions as we break up the Commonwealth. And then myself and Lisa Simmons, who also manages the team, have 2. Lisa then manages the festivals program for people who have applied for that. She's the one that you've been talking to. And then I manage the cultural districts program. And the light shades here represent the 50 that we have on. And the cultural districts program was created by state statute in 2011, and right now we have a cohort of 50 spread out, and we don't see anything up here, but Fitchburg we've been talking to Fitchburg, so pretty psyched in some of these spaces: Gloucester, Concord, Boston, Aquina, or Martha's Vineyard has more than one within them, so you don't see 50 individual shade things. And with that being said, I will unshare and just really quickly put the emails for both myself and Timothy. Actually, Timothy, I know that you're on, so if you could put the emails, both of our emails there on the chat, that would be awesome. And along with that, I would also point to our team does a monthly community check-in where we have panel discussion on different topics. The one we held last week was basically an introduction to a lot of the other teams at the agency. It was super informative, all in about less than an hour. And I would encourage people to go to the YouTube that we posted. That is up online. And Timothy, if you can also cut and paste that into the chat, that would be great. Our districts are comprised of 50, and amongst those 50, they are as different, of all the shades of gray. We have basically 6, I would say around 6 types of districts, and I'll just list them really quick. Cultural compound, which it's like a cultural compound focus, and we're looking at places like Worcester, Salisbury district, and also newly designated Framingham. I would put in that same, and and I see Erica over there in that same label. Major cultural institution focus cultural district, which would be something like the Fenway Cultural District that covers a big swath of land along the Green Line with the MFA, the Gardner Museum, so on and so forth. Cultural productions focus, which are places with like Rocky Neck Art Colony, even Maynard, I would put in that category, because of their density of live or art workspace. Downtown area focus, I would think Rockport Cultural District, Hyannis High Arts, and a majority of our districts, and you'll hear from some today, are what I would call naturally occurring focus districts. And these are districts that develop local resources and assets, and the work is more community-based. And which brings us to a really great lingo within the field of placemaking. With these districts, we've been working a lot with the ever-growing concept of placekeeping. You know, one is like, what are you doing to get people from outside into your space? In placekeeping, what are you doing for the people that actually live around you, right? For the residents that live around your space. There's one thing to have like a tourist space. It's another thing to work continually to provide the quality of service that the arts and culture does provide to a local resident population. What we've seen in during this time of COVID is that the incredible power of the district program is this cohort model, and the cohort model with peer sharing, especially during this time. We do a bi-weekly cultural district check-in where that is not recorded again, and it's basically everyone talking to each other, saying this is what we're doing. People hear about the different things that are happening in different districts, reach out to those people, and basically learn that way. In the past, before the pandemic, we were holding annual convocations, which people loved, and whereas it's so much better to be in person, this pandemic has forced us to rethink this, and in the process of doing this, we're going to continue it now, even though we're not necessarily allowed to, when I come back to the States, to do visits for the time being. I will talk really briefly about the three that you have, and I was not responsible for recommending anyone, but it's funny because these are districts that I always point to when I talk about certain aspects of becoming a cultural district. You will hear from Athena, in Natick, and Athena and Archana are masters at this concept of placekeeping. And in Natick, and it's a beautiful strip, but they are involved in every community-based, they might not lead every community-based effort, but they are involved in every community-based effort, and they definitely know how to leverage that cultural district status. You're also going to talk to Franklin and Nancy. Franklin had a cultural district partnership, which if Lilia, I was going to talk about, the one thing we do ask at the very beginning is to have this very body that you are looking to create, right? When you put up the Google form. Franklin had it for 2 years before the official application went through, and I think Nancy might talk about that, but that just made them so much stronger. They produced 2 separate community events, annual events that just showed that they could work together, because at some point you work to get the designation and then you have to put the work in. Erica and Framingham went even bigger with that because they had this huge institutional like body, right? That is now, I think they've gotten 501c3 designation. You don't have to. The management model is super massaged. You can do however. We have everything from an LCC, Provincetown and Maynard. The LCC actually manages and works with that, to actual organizations, or in this case, in Framingham's case, a cultural district partnership that has become a 501c3 with some major players in there. I'm not going to go huge into how to become, because The first thing is just a conversation, right? What we do ask is, you know, to have this body to guide the work and be prepared once designated to see who's actually going to do the work. We do stress the inclusion of a local cultural council member. We suggest other stuff, but I'm very specific about needing to have a local cultural council participation in this body, because what we don't want to do at the agency is create competing bodies that are all working on the same thing, right? The local cultural council, in essence, should be part of the cultural vision of the town or city. And we don't want to create yet another municipal or ad hoc committee that is competing with that. So we stress that. And then your assets list. Before we have like not a formal site visit, but my site visit of the walkthrough. And we're creating protocols right now of how that can be done COVID friendly. I live right in Cambridge, so I was up in the area for, I think it was 3 years ago. I was in a panel for Fiddler on the Roof, and I rode my bike up there. Beautiful ride along the Charles, and came up, and so I can definitely come whenever for an informal site visit, a number of them, and then a formal site visit just before designation. I will leave it there, and in order to leave time at the end for questions, unless someone has a question now, but I'll just stop there if that's okay.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, we'll save questions for the end. I'm sure we'll have some time, and I see we have a few coming already. But we are going to move on to Steve Magoon right now. Steve is the director of the Department of Community Development and Planning for the town of Watertown. He's also the assistant town manager. He's been working with the town since 2008. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I'm Community Development and Planning Director and Assistant Town Manager here for Watertown. And what I was going to do is talk a little bit about, what we've done in Watertown, our experience with looking at cultural districts. And, I suppose I would start that with, we don't have one. And so I'm certainly not an expert on cultural districts. I'm sure the rest of the panel, in addition to Luis, is going to provide some really good information. I look forward to hearing that. And actually, I'm, don't want to take the first effort to look at this. It was really brought together by Roberta Miller and Barbara Epstein and some others who brought together some stakeholders in the, in the creative community. And we met a number of times to look at the possibility of creating a cultural district. I think there were a number of questions that, as we looked into it, that were important to answer. I think, one of the most important ones is, what's the purpose of it? What do we hope to accomplish with creating a cultural district? What needs would it address? Who's going to be involved in that? One of the other things that was involved is the, geographic boundaries. You need to match those ideas of what you want to accomplish with the geographic boundary of town, of what part of town we're going to focus on. And we saw a number of benefits to establishing a cultural district. I think one of the ones we talked about the most was really bringing together, various parts of the cultural community. I think that there is a significant artistic community in Watertown, but I think there's not a clear identity to that. There's not a clear organization where those interests and efforts, have a place to really go to identify issues or address solutions. So, I think one of the things that we saw as a real potential benefit was an opportunity to organize that artistic and cultural community and really give it a face and provide a focus and a methodology to reach out to various artistic performers in town, people who are creating art but maybe haven't been linked in or coordinated with other people within the community in that way. And obviously, by bringing those groups together would create a way to more effectively identify issues, and create solutions to those issues, create events, branding, all the types of things that would help promote, those who are creating art and again, creates effective solutions for whatever issues arose. And I think things like creative placemaking, is obviously a part of that. I think there's certainly some areas in Watertown where we could benefit from a real focus on that. So, we certainly saw that as a potential benefit. I think one of the biggest hurdles we found, though, was that it really required some dedicated resources. To have a cultural district that's going to be effective, there needs to be, that something more than people who just want to sponsor it or come together and say it's a good idea. We needed, there to be some go-to staff. And I think at that point, we really didn't identify those available resources. Within my department, I didn't have the staff capacity to really take that on. And I don't think, some of the other organizations, felt that they really had the staff resources to effectively do that. So ultimately, we didn't pursue it beyond that. I do want to mention a couple other things, though. We are in the cusp of hopefully adopting a public arts and culture master plan for Watertown. And I think that's a significant effort, in the same vein. And one of the primary recommendations of that is to establish a public arts and culture committee. And while, the focus in the plan was more around creation of public arts, I think that this is also another, certainly a fertile ground for conversation about, the efforts of such a group and whether this would make sense. The plan also recommends, adding staff capacity to the town and dedicated funding sources, things of that nature. Unfortunately, two things. One, we haven't adopted the plan yet, so we need to get past that hurdle. But obviously, COVID is put a hitch in pretty much everything. And I suspect that in this upcoming budget, there's not going to be a desire to create a whole lot of additional staff positions just because of the uncertainty of revenues. So we'll see how that goes. That's certainly something we'll need to look at. And the plan is about to be considered by the council. So there'll be an opportunity for people to weigh in and, express support for public art and, the efforts around both arts and culture in Watertown and make sure that that's represented as we go forward. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Darren.
Thank you very much, Steve. We were planning to hear from Jennifer Erickson, the Director of Arts and Culture at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Unless she's on under a different name, I don't think she's with us this morning, but she was very involved. The council was very involved in helping to facilitate those conversations with the town about our arts and cultural committee. We're going to turn now to some of the other cultural districts that exist in the state. We are going to hear from leaders in 3 of them, beginning with Athena Pandolf. Athena has been the executive director for the Natick Center Cultural District in the fall of 2015 and president of Natick for over 20 years. The Natick Center Cultural District was among the first cultural districts designated in Massachusetts in 2012. Welcome, Athena.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's truly an honor to come and to talk about the cultural districts, and it's really a great opportunity. And I'm excited to hear that you're exploring all of this. And it sounds like you have a great committee and people who are committed to this process. I thought I would just give you a little bit of history on and a little bit of structure on not just what we do, but how we're structured, because that's going to come into play. Just really quickly, in Natick Center Associates is actually the nonprofit, the 501c3 that the district runs under. So that was actually formed in 1996. So it was like a downtown merchants association at a time when businesses were really not that vibrant in Natick Center. The mall in Natick, as you might have known, was kind of drawing some opportunity away from Natick Center. So it was formed to kind of rebuild the downtown, maybe put some light on it, so people could join forces. The merchants would have a community. So it was largely formed for that reason. Over the years, we've had a memorandum of understanding with the town and a contract that just said, Natick Center Associates will help the town facilitate, economic development in the town. And so when the town administrator had looked into becoming a cultural district, probably around 2010, I was a resident, but I wasn't in this position. It was sought after as, this is a great opportunity. So Natick Center Associates, along with the town, went forth and, put in that application, and that was confirmed in 2012. And so we've been a cultural district since that time, but it was really, I think it's interesting to note that our strategic plan was done in 2015 and it just ended last year. And in revisiting that, it's nice and it's interesting to hear that there were bumps along the way. I mean, now we know what a cultural district is, and we have examples of people who've done it brilliantly, like Northampton and Rockland and all these other places. But at the time, it's interesting to hear some skepticism because people didn't really know what it was and didn't see how that was going to work. I mean, Natick did not have any public art at that time. We had a mural at the train station. That was it. So I'm just saying that because I think that it's just worthy to note that sometimes people might not be on board. Even our own board, from what I understand, might not have understood the vision, but that definitely has changed. And so we became a district and in 2012, and then we started the process of, it took a few years to develop a strategic plan and then to go into funding. So we actually, and I'm just giving this information because I'm sure it's going to come up. It took a few years to get the town and the town committee meeting members to understand maybe what a district could be and what it could do for Natick Center. And so I believe it was the 2015 Natick town meeting, there was a warrant article put forth that was asking for $80,000 to run the cultural district per year from the town of Natick. And that was approved, which is wonderful. But from what I understand, it wasn't without some opposition, so to speak. Not major opposition, but people definitely didn't realize what it could do. What was this, was this just going to be a people with a couple paintings? I mean, we had a lot of, we had TCAM, which is a wonderful arts and entertainment facility. We have Walnut Hill, we have a wonderful library. But how was the Natick Cultural District really going to help the community and bring all this together? I don't think anyone could see that, but they believed. And we were very lucky to have that funding, and we still have that funding. So we do have a contract with the town that allows us to have, at that time in 2015, I came in late 2015. They were just looking for an executive director. They did not have one at that time. It was actually run just by a part-time secretary, the Natick Center Associates. So since that time, a lot has happened. The strategic plan was developed, and that was brought in with a lot of different community members and voices from a lot of different parts of Natick Center and Natick, just general Natick businesses and stakeholders. And since that time, we did actually do a creative placemaking plan with the MAPC and Jen Erickson, and that was a wonderful process in 2018, 2019. And so we've done a lot of great things, but it really just comes down to partnerships. And I think that, working with the community and really seeing those partnerships as key to what we could accomplish has changed everything. And I think having committed board members who work with the town administration has been extremely supportive. Our Economic and Development Committee, Community Department has been extremely supportive. So just working with all these people, and not all the events that we do are ours. So we do have over like 52 events, or well, pre-COVID, let's say, a year. And a lot of those were in partnerships with, Park and Rec Department, or, we had things at TCAN. And so this really kind of helps us do what we do. And so it's not just that, people will sometimes say, oh, you're the model. And Louise, I appreciate all the really kind words, and people are very generous. And really it's done, as you all know, the community has come out to support this, and it really does take a community, but you have the assets as well, and Natick does too, in the artist community and the merchant community. And that's kind of what I do, is a little bit of both. I'm still kind of like the downtown chamber of commerce, and I'm an arts and cultural nonprofit. So the nice part about it is people definitely have come on board. The merchants, as I said, were a little bit skeptical when I first started, like, what is she going to do? And what is this going to do for us? But as we created events that kind of helped bring people downtown and allowed some conversation and interaction between them and the merchants and the business community at large, they really kind of saw that, yeah, this really does help us, and this will, bring people downtown to shop and eat. And also the artist community, we gave them some platforms to be involved in projects and creative placemaking, and they kind of, sometimes they start on their own, and they have projects that they come to me with and say, hey, what do you think about doing this? We had the Tunnel of Love, which was a few years ago, which was really done in large part by the library knitters. And they created this just amazing crocheted bridge of flowers on our pedestrian bridge, which people really enjoyed. So that's a little bit about just what we do. And, at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll put our website in the chat, but, it's really in great support to Luis and the Cultural Council for supporting us in all that we do. Our local cultural council, we are involved with. They take part in our events. We speak to them about what we have going on and try to consult with them. So that's really a wonderful partnership. And we're just very grateful for all the people that we have on our board and community members that have helped us succeed. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please do put your link into the chat. I have those too. If the other districts are welcome to do the same. We're going to go from Natick to Franklin now. Nancy Schoen is currently chair of the Franklin Cultural District Committee. She recently retired after 36 years of teaching, 33 in Franklin Public Schools as a music teacher and K-12 director of music. And she continues to teach in Franklin Lifelong Learning's string program. The Franklin Cultural District, I believe, was designated in 2019, and Nancy will tell us a little bit about it.
Good morning, everybody, and I apologize for my late arrival. I'm also on the board of directors at our Franklin Food Pantry, and we had our monthly meeting that starts at 7:30 and always goes to at least 9:30, so I actually had to leave them early to come over. But good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here, and it's exciting to hear that Watertown is looking forward to developing a cultural district, because certainly we know all the benefits that it can bring to a community. Franklin, we're pretty much in our infancy still, but I'd like to tell you, prior to the establishment of the committee or the district, how we got to the point that we're at today and what we're trying to do to move forward. So before we were established, there was a steering committee that was somewhat self-appointed. The town was interested in becoming a cultural district, but in order to do that, they needed to have 3 consecutive years of festivals. So there was a very small group of self-appointed volunteers who got together, and they, for 3 consecutive years, ran a cultural festival that started as just a weekend of event, and then it expanded to a 5-day festival. And they incorporated a lot of different stakeholders, the public schools, the performing arts schools in town, local theater, and they put on some great events, and they did this, as I said, for 3 years. And then at that point, the town wanted to formalize it a little bit more. So they decided that they were going to create it. The town appointed a committee to start the formal application process. So for those of you that have established a cultural district, know that that's quite an involved process. And that took the bulk of our work. We were established in the fall of 2017. People were appointed to the first cultural district committee. And then we formally began our work in January of 2018. And it wasn't until January of 2019 that we were actually formally approved as a cultural district. So in that year, some of the things that we had to do was develop the map of the cultural district. And I shared this with Darren earlier that Franklin has a lot of great assets, and we have a lot of them focused in the downtown area, but we had a couple of them were kind of further out, and we really thought it was important to, number one, include our beautiful high school, because we have a performing arts auditorium that is professional quality. When you're on that stage, you would think that you were in New York City on a beautiful stage. So we wanted to include that because that's our largest venue in town. And then we also have a sculpture park, which is not too far from the high school, but sort of a distance from the downtown area. So we worked hard on just establishing the map, because one of the priorities of being a cultural district is they want it to be walkable. So we finally got it down to what we thought was walkable. And after several submissions, the map was finally approved, and then we could complete the rest of the application. And once you go through that process, they come down for a site visit. They do a pretty significant evaluation and analysis, and they get back to you, and then it goes to the MCC for the formal thing. And then we had a lovely dedication ceremony at our historical museum, followed by a reception at the Black Box Theater, which is right in the heart of our cultural district. So that's how we got our start. But I think it was the work of the 3-year work of the steering committee that really provided a great foundation, because it sort of got people in the community buzzing a little bit about it, which helped us when we went to actually formally apply. So now we've been around for a little over a year. And we work really hard to try to engage our partners. And it's a challenge because we also have in Franklin, a Franklin Downtown Partnership, and that's been in existence for over 20 years. And the Cultural District Committee that we have in Franklin is totally volunteer. It's all volunteers. We have a committee of 7 people. I would say 3 are maybe retired and the other 4 work full time. So that creates some challenges in terms of when are you going to meet and how are you going to reach out to your partners? Because, it'd be great to have a daytime meeting, but we can't include our committee if we do that. So, these are things to consider as you maybe develop your committee as well. And the importance of having subcommittees that can do some work that can meet at different times. We have a website, and I'll put that up in the chat. It's franklinculture.org. And that has helped us get our word out to the partners in the community. And then this past June, we started an electronic newsletter, which is really helping us get our word out. And our actually subscription to that has gone up over 40% since we started just in June. So we're looking at our small gains, because I think a lot of us on the committee are used to getting a lot done in a shorter period of time. When you're in the workforce, you have deadlines and you just can go at it. And you've got a budget and you can plan a little bit better. Whereas, we have to kind of work at, we don't have any funding. We have a very small budget from the town, and we're not a 501(c)(3). We can't be because we are a town committee. So, we have some things that make it a little bit more challenging, but we're still making headway. COVID obviously has thrown a wrench in, but our partners have been amazingly creative, coming up with all different kinds of events that they can do virtually, and then some hybrid. And our culture, we have a cultural council, which is separate from the cultural district, and they also do a wonderful job with virtual events and funding a lot of opportunities. So the things that we're working towards right now, we have a couple things in the works. We applied actually as the cultural district to the cultural council for some funding, and we're doing a small mini festival to celebrate the visual arts, the culinary arts, and the performing arts. And so we're going to have a virtual wine tasting at a local winery, where he's going to do a little class and then do an actual wine tasting where people can sign up ahead of time, purchase a couple of bottles of wine, and actually do the tasting at home, but be directed from the location of the winery. We're going to have a chamber concert with a local cellist who's an outstanding performer. And he'll do a little bit of a talk about it, and then he'll perform. And then and then we also have a visual artist who is actually on our committee, who's done some work in Natick, but now is a Franklin resident, and we're so happy to have her. And she's going to do a virtual paint night at a local brewery. So we're trying to, support the cultural businesses, district businesses, as well as support the culinary, visual, and performing arts. And then we're also working on, this is recently, we're very lucky to have this opportunity for another grant coming from the MCC on a cultural district walking tour. And we're hoping to kick that off in June with a kickoff event that will include a lot of our partners. And it's very much in the planning stages. We have a meeting next Monday night with all of our partners. So we've created the skeleton, and we're hoping to get their feedback to see how they could possibly get involved in all of this. So those are the few things that we're doing right now. As I said, we're not at Natick, but I have to say that Athena has been a tremendous resource, calling her often. And she was actually a guest speaker at our last Cultural District Partners meeting. So they're a great role model, but also are wonderful in acknowledging that every single cultural district is different. Your town and your assets and, your partners are going to not look like anybody else's district. And I think that's important to remember as you go forward, because, you have your unique things that are going on in your community, and you need to celebrate those as you work in your own districts. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell. I want to keep it kind of short, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those in the Q&A at the end. All right. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yes, we do have some questions. We're going to move on and then go back to questions and other information that we want to share. We're going to go from Franklin now to Framingham, the newest cultural district in the state. Erica Oliver Jerem is Deputy Director of Planning and Community Development in the city of Framingham. She was very involved in helping to develop the Framingham Center Common Cultural District, which, as I said, is the state's newest cultural district, being designated in February 2020. Welcome, Erica. I know that Erica was with us.
Yeah, I can't find her. I'm spotlighting in the background, but I can't find her.
Nancy, can you then go back to addressing how public schools may have been involved in the cultural district in Franklin?
Sure. Well, I feel like that's been pretty easy for us because I was the music director for 11 years. And I still, up until COVID, was teaching in the after-school string program, very connected with the art and music department. And so anytime we do anything, we did our dedication, we included artwork from the students at Franklin High School. We had several chamber music performances done by the students at Franklin High School. With the grant from the past grant cycle a year ago, we were able to partner with a live arts group in town. They are a group, a very small group that works out of the Universalist Church, and they enlist top-notch artists from the Boston area, and they bring them to Franklin, and they have performances. So typically they have a chamber music performance schedule that's kind of been on hold, but they've done a couple of virtual things, and they partnered with the public schools. So we got a grant, paid them, they hired the artists, and they came and they did a performance and a master class at Franklin High School. So we try as much as possible to involve the schools and bringing those students out into the community, but also seeing how we can connect the school and the young musicians with great assets that we have outside in the community. And they've also done things where they've, Live Arts has offered, I can't stop that. So if you could just ignore it. They have offered opportunities for students to go to their chamber music series free of charge, which has been wonderful. So it just kind of provides that balance. It's nice to draw them in. So I feel like that's been a pretty easy thing. We also have a Franklin Arts Academy in the Franklin Public Schools, within the schools. It's a school within a school, and students can apply to that starting in their sophomore year. and they have a lot of integrated courses that focus, that the thread of the arts runs through all of them. And that's a wonderful, resource within the schools, but also a great place to go if we're looking for something specific that we want to share with the community. They also do, as I said, I was on the board of the Franklin Food Pantry. There's an empty bowls group at the Franklin High School that creates these bowls every year. And then they have this night of soup, and people can come in, purchase a bowl, have some soup, and then all the proceeds from that go to the food pantry. So we try to connect where we can, and we try to support where we can. I hope that answers the question about the schools anyway.
Thank you. That was great to hear how connected with other organizations the Cultural District is. And now welcome to Erica Oliver Jerem. As I said, the Deputy Director of Planning and Community Development for Framingham, representing the newest cultural district in the state. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have a lot of stuff and information to share. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I know I'd prefer to leave time for comments if people have specific questions, but I sort of assumed that you all would want to know more about how we formed and less about what we're doing now, but I'm happy to talk about any of that stuff. So basically, this conversation in Framingham started, I would say, in 2012, shortly after the legislation passed. I had conversations with the director of the History Center and the Danforth Art Museum. At that time, though, those two institutions, those are our anchor institutions, as you've mentioned, those two institutions were actually about 2 miles separate. They weren't in the same place. So we kind of let it go at that point because the Danforth was in the process of considering moving to a new location. And if they did succeed in locating closer to the History Center, then we would revive the conversation. That did actually happen. And so with the Danforth Art Museum on the Center Common with the History Center, we were able to revive this conversation. And I will say it actually was the brainchild, the restarting of the conversation was the brainchild of the late Rep. Chris Walsh, who was he was an architect and he was very into arts and planning. Those were his big interests as a legislator. He brought together a group of the right people, and they were all his friends. They were people who knew how to get stuff done in Framingham. And we would meet in his office, and his staff actually staffed our efforts. His staff took notes. They kind of kept us organized, kept the meetings running, and kept us moving forward. There were some discussions at the time about how to I don't want to say deal with, but how to integrate the Downtown Framingham Inc. At that point, it was called Framingham Downtown Renaissance. It was a very active sort of downtown organization, more like a Main Streets program, but they were a going organization similar to Natick, but they were really, it's too far. And we talked about whether you could create an arts corridor. That was not something that would really work with the way the cultural district program is set up. So in the end, we actually let people know that you could have two cultural districts. Right now, we only have the one, but at some point in the future, we do think we could probably work on creating a cultural district in the downtown. And these two districts would have a very different character. As mentioned, the institutions really drive this Framingham Center Common Cultural District. It is a historic district, and there's a different feel up there than there is downtown, which is a little bit more funky and artsy and sort of ethnic. Let's see, the key people in the room I want to mention were, at the time when Chris Walsh pulled us all together, were the directors of the museum and the History Center, the vice president of Framingham State University, that's another one of our major anchor institutions, representatives from the Metro West Travel and Tourism Bureau, representatives from various churches around the Common. There's a number of historic churches there, representatives from one or two of the banks on the Common, and the chair of the Framingham Cultural Council was in the room. And we also had representatives of the Historic District Commission. As I said, that's an interested group in this situation. And we had folks from the Learning Center from the Deaf, which is a unique organization in the Framingham Center Common area. So that group kind of started meeting and talking about what this could look like. We met with Natick folks and talked about their strategic planning efforts and how they got started. Their model is a little different than ours, but it was definitely worth taking notes and understanding how it works, especially since they were much more established at that point. My staff were working on pulling together the application, and there were a lot of pieces, there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of, you need to gather a lot of information. We were trying to meet monthly. At some point, the group actually established a 501c3 corporation in order to accept some donations from one of the banks. In the intervening years, the Rep Walsh passed away. And at that point, we decided in my office, the planning office in City Hall decided that we would take this on and keep this moving forward and sort of staff this effort because it was important to the community. We were doing the things we're good at, which is pulling together the pieces, writing the application, holding public hearings, getting political buy-in, getting folks to support this and understand it. We created the webpage on our city page just to have a home page where people could land and learn more about it. And one of the things we did when we had our big public meeting, which is required, we actually had a separate meeting for just the business community. We sent letters to everyone. There's about 100 businesses in the district. We sent letters to all of them and invited them to come join us and talk about this effort. And I think that went a long way to building some support here. We told them, we're not going to ask you for money right up front. This is about building support and building a coalition. In the spring of 2019, I worked with a graphic design class at Framingham State University to craft a logo for this new organization. I felt like we needed some kind of an anchor for our visual anchor for our efforts. And this was an extremely rewarding experience. I had a great time doing it. And we came up with a really amazing logo. If you go to our website, the Framingham Center Common website, you'll see it. It really kind of knocked it out of the park. And everybody agreed that the group really felt that this was a strong logo and something we could build on. In spring 2019, we had our initial site walk with Luis. I can't recommend that enough. Even if you just have basic questions, he's such an amazing resource. He will really tell you how he sees it and what he thinks is strong about your application and your efforts and what he thinks might need work. His key comments to us were that the district we'd drawn was too large and that we should kind of tighten it a little bit to keep it in the sense of walkability. He also gave us the advice that given the demographics in Framingham, we should consider working on the diversity of our board. And that's something that's challenging, but we're working on it. And we've taken that to heart. In fall 2019, we were ready to submit our application. As I said, I told the group, I know how to get this application out the door, but I know nothing about running or, creating an organization from the ground up or running a nonprofit. So the people in the room were people who knew how to do this. It was, like I said, the director of the History Center, the director of the Danforth, folks who had started a group called Leadership Metro West. These were all really great organizations and they knew how to get this stuff done. We had already started crafting, governing bylaws for the group and a description of what a board member, sort of a job description for board members, so that folks who were being asked to join the board more formally would really know what they were expected to do. And, we talked a lot, is this a, raise money kind of board, or is this a get stuff done kind of board? Those are the conversations that we were having. In January 2020, we had our big community conversation as part of the final application. And we pulled together a community group that Anita Walker said she'd never seen a crowd quite like this one. We were really pleased by that because it really showed the support in Framingham for this effort. And before COVID met, we were able to meet in person once as a group, as a board, to have an initial strategic planning session. In summer 2020, we debuted our new website, and you can check it out, see all the stuff we're doing. One of the key decisions we made was that we were not going to necessarily be an organization, especially in the beginning, we were not going to necessarily be creating our own events or have that skill set in-house, that we were going to work to leverage the events and the activities that our member organizations were undertaking. So we were thinking maybe one giant big event on the common every year. And then other than that, we would be using our calendar to promote the various members of our coalition. And, you know, my key takeaway is that you really just need the right people in the room. Who are those people that are dedicated to this, that can give their time and their knowledge to this? Make sure you're balancing who's in the room with their skill sets, and you know, get the board on board that wants to be there. And we have some big stuff coming up in the next few months, years. We are working to kind of get through COVID and begin having events again. We've done a little bit in the meantime, and I'm happy to talk more about the events that have happened since COVID. But for the time being, it's really the focus of the next few years is capacity building, finding some funding streams. Currently, the staff who runs the organization is maybe 5 hours a week, and she works under my authority. I leave her some independence to do that because she's also my historic preservation planner, and so she does both. She wears both hats, but I don't direct her efforts in this. She works for the board in this effort, and I'm on ex officio on the board as a representative of the city, as is the cultural district. I'm sorry, the cultural council chair. The two of us serve on the board as well. I know I've said a lot in a short amount of time. I want to make sure there's time for questions. If anybody has questions for me specifically, please let me know.
Thank you, Erica. It has been really great to hear from 3 different cultural districts in different points in their history, different sizes, different organizational structures. And I know that we have some questions for all of you. I want to remind everyone again that we have a link in the chat for joining a volunteer committee to help move this discussion forward. Links to the cultural districts have been put in there. Also, add questions if you'd like. We've had a few questions come for Luis that Luis, you've addressed a little bit right in the chat box, but can you speak a little bit more about defining the area of a cultural district?
Yes, and Darren, give me a thumbs up on your thing if you can hear me well, because I'm experiencing a little lag, and I want to make sure that, okay, thank you so much. Yeah, size is and boundaries is probably the one place where the agency in the past has shifted what has been proposed, and a lot of that comes from the end formal site visit. There's definitely a lot of input from me on what I think works. We stress navigability as opposed to walkability because in spaces with older populations, right? Like people, you know, it's easier for them to just jump in a car and go from here to here, and that might make a difference of I don't know, quarter mile, right? A normal 8-minute walk, but what I like to say is, you know, when you drop someone off, you know, who doesn't know the area, they tend to want to, you know, you can feel like I can go up to a corner and kind of look down and see, you should be able to feel the edges, right? As you walk around in a new space. And oh, what else was I going to say about that? Yeah, no, I'm blanking on my last point. It'll come back to me. But we do. I mean, we have districts who it gets political. This is what I was going to say. A lot of times you'll go up, you'll draw initial line, and then the business / entity across the street or a block away will say, well, you're right here. Why don't you just go up, right? We understand that locally you are facing those pressures as you put these lines together, and they can be political. So we allow ourselves to be like the bad person, right? Like coming in and at the end and saying, no, it has to be this size. We haven't done that a lot during these conversations. Winchester, in one case, like their district is a beautiful like handprint with a couple little stretches out, like this is the nucleus, and then maybe something here. They wanted something like over here. But we allow at the 5-year, this would be a 5-year designation. And at the 5-year mark, you're allowed to make a case for redrawing based on the situations at hand. So if your thought right now is, we want to go up to this spot because it will allow us to maybe pitch it better for future development, what we've done is said, well, let's wait those 5 years to see if that development actually took place to move it up, because then you can make that change. That's the one change you could do during the 5-year redesignation mark. But otherwise, you know, navigability is different. Fenway is about 2 miles long, but you can jump on the green line, right, and go from Church of the the Scientist Church all the way up closer into Brookline. And whereas Barnstable Village is maybe a 10-minute walk from one end to the other. I've been lucky. I've been here for a little over 2 years, and of the 50, I've visited 38, 39 until COVID came. And as Erica said, we walked that district in the snow, and their initial thought was to go to what their historical designation boundaries were, but that also went all the way to the highway. So we had to and this happened before the official application went in, so they were willing to go down a little. Same with Lennox. The Shakespeare group is just out, but they became what we say a collaborating partner. And this will be my last point on that. The collaborating partner is key because in this past $10 million fund that the governor made available, there was preference built in for spaces within the cultural district. And so we allow for collaborating partners to benefit from that preference. So you can have someone who does a lot of work. Sometimes it might be a farmer's market who's based outside, but they might do it in the common. They're based out here, but they do work, they do programming, they add a lot of benefit to the district. So we basically do consider them in those cases part of the district. I hope that helped.
Great, yes, thank you. And it's a lot for us to think about too, and the considerations that we have to keep in mind. Question came in privately also about discussing the economic impact on commercial businesses and other businesses. So we'd love to hear from any of the cultural districts about economic impact on the local community. Athena, could you speak to that first a little?
Sure. You know, I think that for Natick Center, it has been tremendous. I think that not only, you know, engaging the community through public art, but also the events that we've been able to establish. One of those that was solely focused on the downtown merchants, and it did involve other businesses in Natick if there were members of the district, is Natick Nights. And this is one that we started it was June, July, August, and September actually when it first started, and then it went to 2 months, and it was every Thursday from 5 to 8. And what we did is we just, you know, allowed the businesses to say, this is the night that we're going to help promote you. You're open late anyway. We ended up having themed nights. We had a scavenger hunt. So I guess what I'm saying is over time, the community got used to these events, looked forward to these events. It created some dialogue and some interaction between, as they say, comfortable collisions between the merchants and the community members where maybe they didn't really know them very well, but this gave them an opportunity. And so as we partnered with the merchants, I think we've seen a tremendous increase in business and in sales. One last example is this year in March, I have to admit, like most of districts and other downtown communities, I was very concerned. How many closures of stores were we going to see? How many, what is going to happen to our downtown? And unfortunately, we did have 2 closings, which happened to be more fitness related. So that made sense with COVID, but we had 4 to 5 new shops open in the center this year, which blows me away. But not only that, the community support was huge. They would come down and they would shop when we had sidewalk sales. So I think what I'm trying to say is it is extremely beneficial to the business community. They're allowed to be members. They talk with one another and have a great community support. But also, I think the community buy-in to the shop local has really, really helped because of the events and what we've done.
Thank you. Erica, can you add
Yeah.
anything on the economic impact?
I think it's a little soon for us to understand the economic impact. I mean, you know, we were designated in January 2020, and then boom, COVID hit. I will say that the Center Common businesses have historically been less, you know, people, they're not really on folks' radar screen, and it has, you know, we're still taking time to establish this as a district with places that people want, they go to them. It's hard to describe, but they don't necessarily think of this business or that business as part of the historic of the Center Common cultural district yet. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is promote them on social media, individual businesses, especially through COVID. It's kind of one of our only resources. We can't necessarily have events around them or have, you know, walking tours or anything like that of the common, but we can, we are using our social media, specifically Facebook, to promote these businesses and let folks know they're open, and let folks know that they are open for takeout, or that they're, you know, they're doing this or that or the other thing. So that's been one of the things we've tried to do. We also, I will say that one of our kind of anchor businesses actually closed for good, and that was really sad for us. And I'm hoping that a new restaurant comes into that space. But we do have, you know, we still have a lot of businesses going on there, you know, yoga studios and restaurants and bath fitters, and, you know, this is sort of a really eclectic mix of folks in this Center Common district. So trying to give them some identity. We created stickers that businesses can put in their windows for when people start walking around again, that say, you know, I'm a proud supporter of the Framingham Center Common Business District. Little things like that. Anything that we can do during COVID has been, we're trying anything, and we're open to all ideas.
Thank you. Nancy, anything to add? And we're also interested, a question came about funding. We've heard about grants and town funds being designated, but any other creative ways that the cultural district itself is funded, we would love to hear about also.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of additional resources for funding at this point. You know, we've only been around for about a year, and we have a small town budget, and then we've been, you know, grateful for the MCC grants that have enabled us to, you know, enlist partners to host events and things like that. But we're trying to pair up with the Franklin Downtown Partnership to do some things. So that's a little bit of the shared resources. I don't know if I explained enough about them, but they are a group that's been in existence for over 20 years, and it's a membership paid group that really supports the businesses. And it's not just in the cultural district, but it's in all of Franklin. So they have, you know, quite a bit more revenue. They used to be supported by the town, and then the town cut them out of the budget, but so they're self-funding. So they actually are a mechanism, you know, they're constantly trying to raise some money, and they host two enormous festivals typically every year. One is a strawberry stroll, and one is a fall festival. And these attract, you know, 5,000 to 6,000 people that come into the downtown area. So we certainly participate and support those initiatives, and have had a booth and, you know, get involved with that. And that certainly brings a lot of revenue into the town. But we also have in the heart of our downtown a Franklin Black Box Theater, and they do lots of great shows. They bring people, actors in from New York, and they obviously, when people come to see performances there, they're going to grab a meal maybe someplace, or they're going to maybe stop by and pick up a few things at a convenience store, or maybe fill up their tank with gas. So we feel like that economically has a big impact. They also have a school for performing arts, and we have an encore recording arts academy and studio, and a drummer studio. So they have performances, and they will fill a 2,000 seat auditorium with multiple performances every year. So again, that has an enormous impact about what it brings into Franklin. So those are the, you know, hardcore economic impacts that we can see. In our cultural district, we did have one vendor move out of the downtown area, and then actually a second restaurant moved to another location, which is on the edge of the district. But then a very popular pub restaurant, Teddy Gallagher's Pub, closed recently, which is a huge loss to our community. But they just on Friday had a fundraiser to see if they could give them the money to kind of get back on their feet. So we're waiting to see how that all pans out. But those are the basic ways. You know, the funding piece is something that we're constantly talking about and looking at. And we have to be careful when we go out to solicit funds because we're, number one, a town organization. And then secondly, we don't want to tread on the Franklin Downtown Partnership either, who, has a lot of deep connections with a lot of the big partners, the banks in town, and some of the other partners. So, it's this balancing act that we're trying to work collaboratively, not overshadow, not step on toes, but also forge our path forward. So, it's every district has their, their little, I guess, road that they're following or path. So, everybody, you have to just kind of do the work. And if you're taking steps in the right direction, even if it's small gains, you have to kind of celebrate those and then keep at it.
Great, thank you. And
that helps.
Natick and Framingham both have nonprofits operating their districts. Athena, could you speak a little bit about
revenue streams?
Funding? Sure.
Yeah, so ours is, as I mentioned, we do receive funding from the town. We have a 3-year contract with the town that renews every 3 years. It's basically at this point a line item in the select board's budget. We also host the farmers market. So that's something I didn't mention. We've actually had a downtown farmers market for about 20 years on the common. So that definitely helps in that regard. And it also just helps local makers and community farms to be a part of, our events and to, help the downtown. We do apply for grants through the MCC and other places. We receive sponsorships from local banks or local businesses for, specific events. And then we have our members. So we do have memberships to the Natick Center Cultural District, which are fairly reasonable considering I feel like what they get for it. So that is another form along with like an annual fundraiser or something like that. So those are pretty much our streams of revenue.
Thank you. And a couple questions, Luis, maybe you can address. When is it appropriate for a town to consider having 2 cultural districts? And another question that came into me, maybe anybody, if you have something to add, how can real estate owners and developers be supportive? So, Luis.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, so to, I think it was Barbara's question, it's we don't encourage this happening at the same time, the proposal and bringing forth of 2 separate districts, because we realize in some spaces, depending on the size, you'll have like 15 people here as a cultural district partnership and 14 here, and 10 of those 14 here are the same people. Depending on the size of the space, there's always, it's a lot of the same people pushing these efforts. So we really want you to focus on one. We have one town that is stuck because they haven't internally been able to decide on what, because they similarly have 2 spaces that they feel they could bring forward. And keep in mind, cultural districts exist everywhere. It's just, how do we identify and how, as has been mentioned before, what kind of group can we put together to do the work after designation. And just to pop back real quick to Athena's point, we've been having this discussion in our cultural district check-in regarding governance. Oh, sorry, Sherry. And of that, in that one check-in, we had 12 districts speak to their governance model. There were 10 different models. So, right, so it's not one size fits all. There's not like 2, you can either do this or that. There are some ideal situations, and you'll see some groups who have, obviously like any ad hoc group, volunteer groups are not the most sustainable because people come and go. But you can do many things. I do want to say and kind of stress, because I've seen this in a number of spaces, and when we do ask for you to go through an asset mapping exercise, and I find that people tend to get stuck on their definitions of arts and culture, and then they sometimes they beat themselves up like, oh, we don't have a lot of art galleries, or like they really go along one line, and we do offer suggestions, but that's one thing that I and others can do to help you with that. You'd be surprised how many people don't put the library. Like, you know, the library tends to be the largest cultural like asset in many communities in the Commonwealth, and they deal with everything. And we're seeing it most now, like between libraries and community access stations, how important they have been to helping artists and arts organization put forth their things, so people can at least not be disconnected. I went to a COVID-safe like outdoor performance Saturday night in Cabo Rojo, southwest corner of the island, 20 people spread out. And it hit me that that was only my second live performance that I've seen since March, right? This thing is really hitting us. So, you know, the Boston Literary District, obviously their whole thing is literature. They have a huge book festival there. Farmers markets are everywhere. That is a big, farmers markets tend to be a wonderful asset for local artists, local musicians to play at. Now they're being challenged, right? But that definitely is something to consider. And this is the fun thing about having that asset mapping exercise. I can take multiple steps, because someone will mention something that immediately blows the walls out of everybody's thinking, and they go, oh, if we're going to ask that, we're going to do this, right? Bedford has the Bedford flag in the library in a hermetically sealed thing that you have to give the license to. It's pretty cool. It's like going to see the Declaration of Independence. But I would stress that. And I'm sorry, Darren, I went off on a thing, but I did want to answer. I think I answered Barbara's question, and then you asked the hard one, which I'm blanking on. What was that second part, which I went, ooh, that's not so simple.
And yeah, and any of the districts can speak to this also, about how real estate developers or real estate owners, large corporate businesses, could be supportive of a cultural district.
Real estate agents in Natick definitely tout it as something that's a benefit for people moving to Natick centers. And I know they've definitely used it to their advantage, which is great. And we're happy about that. We actually had partnered with one of them to have like a welcome to Natick event, which would not only talk about what was available to Natick as far as nonprofits and resources, but also to mention the district and to help the community understand. So in that way, you know, we've partnered with them. You know, I don't know if I've seen direct, a lot of them are members of the district, so they definitely benefit from, you know, being a part of, you know, our website, or being, you know, a part of some of our events that we have. They can come down and share information. It seems to be a relationship that definitely works both ways. I mean, they benefit from having us, we benefit from having them, you know, share about what the district is. And we've handed out flyers to them just about our events and who we are. So I'm not sure that answers the questions, but that's kind of been our relationship with the with the realtors in the area.
Erica?
Jump in. Yeah, I will say a lot of the land in the district is actually owned by the city, so that's, you know, one of our challenges. The city does own the History Center land and the common itself, and then many of the others are nonprofits or churches. So that's been a challenge in terms of getting big landowners on board. One of our most active board members is a residential broker. And she saw early on that she really, you know, that this is a point of you know, a selling point for her in her business, and really kind of jumped in with both feet, both in the sense of supporting the cultural district, but also helping her peers, because she's very active in the residential brokers in the rest of Framingham, and actually regionally, she's very active in that organization. She said, you know, folks need to understand how historic district works. You know, can you come and talk to them about this historic district and what it means to own a historic home in a historic district, as well as, you know, help us sell this cultural district idea. So I think that it's an important relationship. And, you know, the bonus for us is she's one of the first ones to write a big check when we need one. You know, she can't necessarily support the organization, but if we have a fundraiser, she's like, yep, here, I'll get you started, you know, with the seed money for things like that. So it's really been a great relationship there, specifically with her. But I think in terms of the brokers, they get it. You know, you're trying to sell this district, and this is something that they understand.
Thank you. And Luis, I know you have a little bit of a delay, so if you want to add anything. Before that, before we end in a few minutes, I just want to draw attention to some other information in the chat. On February 4th, Thursday at 6 p.m., the Economic Development Committee of the Town Council is going to consider the Public Arts and Culture Master Plan. And this is an opportunity for residents and business people to show support for the plan. Thank you, Barbara, for posting that information. We also have the agenda for that meeting and a link to the public master plan. Thank you, Vinny, for posting those. Luis, anything to...
Darren, yeah. So you know what, I don't have much to add. This is a very interesting topic. And it's one that gets talked a lot about within creation, because you know, there are two programs at the agency that are created by state statute. And in this one, there's very specific language to what the goals can be, you know, benefit artists, this and that. And then also one goal would be to raise property values. And my question to communities who are, you know, who want to do this is, what does that mean to you? What does that eventual consequence mean to you and your merchants, you know, the per square foot price of your space, of the, you know, like the conversation of gentrification definitely starts at that spot. And so, yes, real estate agents would love this, you know, that anything they can do to market, right, will help them. That's a no-brainer. You know, I'm more interested in how, you know, like in Franklin's case, there's a huge business that had closed after 100 years. Nancy, remind me of the name. It's just like old saddle something business, but huge swath of land, and there.
Yeah, it was Clark. It was they used to manufacture a part for the auto industry, and they fell on hard times and went out of business. And now that parcel has been for sale and it's sold, and we're trying to get some maker space in there and some creative establishments. And it's great because even though it's just outside the district, it's really literally like across the street. So the potential for it to be a great space for small performances and, you know, just having some maker spaces for pop-up artists who want to come in and do an exhibit, or we're always looking for more spaces for our visual artists too. So we have a lot of hope for that parcel. It's slow to develop, and COVID has really kind of put a little bit of a damper on it, but the potential is there. Also have an elementary school that's on the other corner that is most likely going to close down, and that's, you know, owned by the towns. Keeping our fingers crossed that maybe something comes of that as well.
And so, Darren, I was going to say that this is a great example of how, like in this case, the Brian Taberner at Franklin was very specific about, it would be great to keep this in the district because we really want to push like a creative use for this. So Nancy, it actually is, right? Because right after the cemetery, it's that, and yes. Then I think we extended it to the artist lofts further down the street. So
that's right.
So I just wanted to add that. And Lilia, just real quick, Allie Carter in Arlington works with the Parking Benefits District there, and she is awesome and accessible. And I would definitely reach out to her to ask her how the Parking Benefits District, if they have any money shifting over to the district as far as funding.
Thank you. We do want to wrap up in the next couple of minutes. There have been some additional questions. We'll address all of these in meetings as we get together and continue this discussion and begin working. somebody had asked about benefits to other artists and cultural organizations that may be outside of the district. And I know that there are ways, it was mentioned, for them to be involved as partners. And certainly in any festivals and larger events that are held within the district. And Lilia, can I ask you to come back and just speak again about the information that you're sharing and that we'll send out, and where we go from here also?
Sure. So just as a reminder, I've put in the chat several times a link for a form you can fill out to be on the list to find out about what the next steps are going to be. Obviously, we'd love to have volunteers in whatever capacity they're able to help us, whether that's just staying tuned about what's going on or, jumping in both feet and really willing to help us move this forward. If you're anywhere on that spectrum of interest, please fill out the form just so that we can keep you in the loop. And I will send out a wrap-up email that will list all of the links that we talked about today, so you can reference them, as well as a replay of the video. We'll also post the video in the WBC newsletter that comes out on a weekly basis. If you're not already signed up for that, you should definitely get signed up. And you can drop your email in the chat or to me directly if you need to be signed up to that. And also, I believe it's going to go on Darren's YouTube channel for the Mosesian. Is that correct?
Yes, we will post it there. Thank you. Yeah, and I've also posted some links and information about economic benefits of the arts to towns and states and communities. So we'll share that link also, Lily. I'll make sure you have that. Our thanks again to everybody who spoke today, everybody who attended today. I want to thank you too for this opportunity, because in this time of COVID, joining an arts organization as a new leader is just outrageously odd. And things like this have just been a wonderful way for me to get to know this community better. And you've all been so welcoming, and I invite you to reach out to me with any questions about this also. And thank you again. Thank you, Lilia. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to everybody who's been involved. Anything before we go, Lilia?
I think that's all. Everyone stay excited about the Cultural District, because it's an amazing thing and we can make even more amazing things happen in Watertown than are already happening. Yay, culture.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good to see you all.